Our next guest on the Recursive podcast is an entrepreneur who is keen on technology and AI as much as he enjoys talking about philosophy and leadership. Ciprian Borodescu is the co-founder of MorphL, a startup that developed an artificial intelligence-based solution to help online stores increase sales and optimize their product metrics. His startup was acquired by the French company Algolia, but Ciprian remains the head of R&D center they opened in Bucharest. Ciprian is a follower of Stoicism philosophy, a sports lover, and a podcast host of a show about artificial intelligence. Chip, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
It's very interesting for me to be meeting a founder, former startup founder, turned into a person that's running a large organization of people. Also interested in Stoicism and philosophy, which would be something that I'm going to inspect through in the next couple of minutes.
Okay.
Would you briefly introduce yourself as a way of entrepreneurial mind that you have, and what did Stoicism bring to your skills and the way that you handle situations in life?
I came across Stoicism back in 2017, actually. It was after reading Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. And then I didn't take that into consideration, but then I went through Alt MBA, which is Seth Godin's MBA program. And then we had over there to read a lot of books, and some of them were referring back to Stoicism and Greek philosophy. And I was like, I should check this out because there are good principles over there. And then I started reading more and more about Stoicism, and then I had the courage of actually reading the real Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and so on. And this was before the pandemic. And it really came in handy during the pandemic, because what happened was that we started 2020 with, back then at MorphL, we started with a huge excitement and energy to raise our first seed round. And everything went to hell because the pandemic came. But this philosophy helped me understand for the first time, because you read about this stuff, but you don't really understand unless you actually live it, how much is out of our control. And so that helped me ground myself. And the first thing that I did was to actually talk to the people in our company, in our small startups, and guys, do not worry. Whatever happens, but you will not get out of, you'll still be part of this team. We are going to have, I'm going to make sure that you will have salaries by the end of this year and even beyond that, because hey, we didn't know if this world would actually need AI anymore. It was very confusing times. And so the first thing that I did was to take care of our guys. And I had it helped me, the Stoicism philosophy, to have a long-term view on this thing. And it turned out to be really good.
How did you manage to switch from looking for funding with the seed round to basically being acquired by a giant?
It happened by, luck.
Luck is when the preparation meets the opportunity.
I think so, because MorphL basically was our third startup. And when I say our, I also refer to Alexandra. She was the co-founder and CTO. We've been in this entrepreneurial journey for 15, 16 years. And yes, MorphL was founded back in 2018. It was founded after we got a grant from Google Digital News Innovation Fund. It was 50,000 euros back then. And then in September 2018, we got another grant from European Data Incubator, 100,000 euros. We pivoted from the publishing industry, where our focus was back then, into the e-commerce industry. And all of a sudden in 2019, before the pandemic, we were already building a platform for e-commerce. Still not sexy back then. We got accepted into the Techstars Montreal AI accelerator. Still not sexy. But we got into the accelerator, and probably we're going to talk about that. And then the pandemic came. The first half of 2020 was pretty crazy. Although I had conversations with investors, because it was mayhem and confusion, they would stop answering my calls, and it was not just about me. It was not personal, obviously. But then, all of a sudden, people realized by the half of 2020 that, hey, e-commerce and AI is very interesting. That's why I said that we were lucky. We were the same in 2019. We were the same in 2020. But everything around us changed. And so in the autumn of 2020, we accelerated conversations with investors. We were in the same mindset of raising our seed round. We actually had term sheet. We were negotiating with the investors in Romania, investors in UK, in US, and Canada. We had commitments. And we were on the verge of actually signing that term sheet. And all of a sudden, the VP and the CTO of Algolia, the VP of engineering and the CTO of Algolia, signed up to the platform. And of course, I get notifications because this is what I did. This is what I do. I would give them demos to those that registered to the platform and so on. And when I saw that at the very same time, two people from the same company registered, signed up on the platform, I was like, what are these guys doing here? Are they spying or something? Of course, I knew about Algolia, but I didn't know about them intimately, what they do exactly. And so I did a little bit of research, and I obviously did whatever I usually did with the other customers and prospects. I would send them an email, hey, let's have a conversation. I would like to understand if I can help you with anything. And they immediately answered. We scheduled a Zoom call. I went through the platform, showed them everything, and after about 45-50 minutes, Julien Lemond, the CTO, really, in a humble way, in a considerate way, but in a direct and candid way, he said like, hey, we're actually interested in acquiring technologies such as yourself. What do you think about that? And obviously, I was not in that mindset of selling MorphL. We did not want to do that. We were just discussing with investors. And I told him like, hey, this is not a decision that I can make in this call right now. Like, I need to know more information. I need to know more about you. But hey, full transparency, we actually have a term sheet. We're actually discussing with investors now. So let me think about it. There are so many things that I have to do before making a decision. One thing led to another. We had more conversations with them to understand what they are looking at doing with the technology. We didn't want to sell. MorphL. But if we did, we wanted to have continuity because we believe in the product back then and today. And so, long story short, they explained, even the CEO, she came into a conversation with us. She explained everything that we needed to know. And I was actually surprised that a CEO of that company, come on, they have, at that point, they had 10,000 customers, 100 and something million in Series C investment. And there we were, just 4 or 5 people startup, talking to us.
In Romania.
Talking to us from the same level. Never once have I felt that they were looking at us down on us. So we aligned on values, we aligned on the financials, because that was important as well, and they were very, very generous. For us, it was still a hard decision to make. Even though at that point, we had like 90% of the company as founders. So for us, it was an incredible deal. But it was also a life-changing deal, because after 15, 16 years of doing entrepreneurship, we didn't know how to do anything else. That was our life. And so we realized that if we do this, then our life will change. We will become employees, which is not bad, but we wanted to have continuity. We wanted to understand, how can we grow? How can we complete ourselves? Because for example, I was never working for a corporation or for another company. And so I missed kind of like that perspective. And I remember talking to Alexandra, and I said, like, hey, so Algolia is kind of like pre-IPO. You do not have a lot of chances of understanding how to take a company IPO. And now we have access to that kind of insights. Of course, it's work in progress. Yeah, we made that decision, and there are no regrets. We are now 1 year into working at Algolia, and we're happy. We have an impact, and yeah, hopefully it's gonna stay like that for the next years.
How did it grow MorphL's team into Algolia, Romania? Because you said you were like 4 or 5 people becoming part of your like research and development here on your product to be part of the portfolio of the company. But what did this switch allowed you to do? Like quicker, better, the resources. I mean, I really, it sounds amazing for me to have an insight on this particular process.
Yeah. I had the same questions at the beginning of the year when we joined. We took a leap of faith. Then again, they also did that. I have to be honest, for me personally, as a founder and as a CEO, it was not easy the first 3-4 months for me to all of a sudden have other people telling me what to do. Because I was the CEO, I was the one actually telling people what to do. Well, more or less, I'm
responsible.
And I'm dramatic for the effect, but still. And then I was, at the same time, I was surprised how willing these people were to actually draw on my insights in the AI ecosystem for these 3 years of MorphL. That I felt like I had impact. I felt like these people actually care about what I want. And as head of AI R&D in Romania, what I noticed is that I had absolutely increased powers or capabilities of hiring the best people. And when I look, right now we are 8 people. We doubled in size, but it's not a lot. And the reason we have these 8 people now and not 60 people is that we do not hire people, and we do not think of people as being a transactional matter. Our hiring process is designed to have 5 steps, and we talk about values. We actually have half a day. The 5th step is half a day we talk about values, because we want to hire people that not necessarily think like us. We encourage the diversity, but at least they have our values, or their values are aligned with ours. And so that's the part with the recruitment and everything. And we want next year to be 20 people. So we're going to accelerate that. What I also noticed is that while as a startup, you can make decisions really, really fast, and the next day you have an MVP. Obviously, in a company that at the beginning of this year, Algolia was 300 people, now we're over 500. things take time. But when you make that decision, my God, it's like a train, locomotive. When you started hard. It starts. But when you start, you cannot really stop it. And I saw that. So after MorphL got acquired, the technology from MorphL was split in two. One product we launched was Algolia Recommend, and I was part of that team. We launched Algolia Recommend in June, and I could actually see how in 3-4 months, people inside of Algolia, together with ex-MorphL team, we actually launched a new product. And that was amazing to see, and scalable to 10,000 customers. Not just an MVP, not a product that you, as a four people person, let's say you say like, it's fine, we can try it out and improve it afterwards. So that was amazing to see the power at Algolia.
Great, super cool. I've always wanted to have the conversation with a person that switched from entrepreneurship to this way more resourceful, but yet due to the flexibility that you acquired prior to this, basically forming like two great powers together. Okay, I would like to go back a step. Mm-hmm. You said that you've been more than 15 years into entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. What sparked the drive in you?
I actually asked the very same question myself. As a side note, something is afoot with us between 30 and 40 years old. You begin asking yourself these kind of strange questions. And for some of us, at least that happened to me, I remember things that I didn't even know I have in my memory. So a few years ago, I remember that I was 10 years old. This was super weird. So I was 10 years old. It was just right after the revolution in Romania. And I don't know if you guys had this, but we had turbo gums, chewing gum.
Yeah, collecting the images of the cars.
There we go. Exactly.
Southeastern Europe, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. This is like the Eastern Europe mafia. Exactly. So what I did as a 10 years old, I actually wanted to have more pictures with cars. And of course, my parents wouldn't give me the money because one, we didn't have it, and two, it was not really healthy to eat a lot of gum. And so I had this unfair advantage of having some more toys than the other kids on the block. So what I did was, I don't even know where this came from, but I actually started renting my toys for pictures with cars. And that actually made sense. And people and kids came to me with their pictures with cars, and we would exchange. Here you are. This is the game. You can play it for like half an hour or something like that. And so after a few days, up to a week, I think it was, I managed to get like a few hundred pictures with cars, and I was very happy. But then I thought like, hey, what if I rent these toys for
longer periods?
No, for money. And so I started.
This is the true entrepreneur right there.
Well, it didn't feel like that because I was 10 years old, but I started doing that, and of course it was short-lived because the spoiled brats, what they would do is they would go and steal money from their mother's purses and father's wallets, and their parents eventually started talking to my parents, and my first venture went into a screeching halt, but
regulations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was. But that I actually remember that at 30-something years, and it's amazing. My interpretation at that age was that, hey, that was an entrepreneurial spark. My parents didn't have the education to recognize that. Clearly, the neighbors and everyone else didn't. And so it stopped. It went, kind of like buried inside of me for years and years and years, and it sparked again in college when I met Alexandra because we went through the same university. We started as as a couple, but they ended up being business partners as well. And I didn't know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but somehow I knew that I wanted to have an impact. Even when I was a kid, I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to have meaning, to have a positive influence on those around me. And I know it sounds, cheesy and all of that, but this is how I live today as well.
Yeah. Talking about values and what you just said is like, I can relate so much to it. It's amazing. Okay, I'll get you back on Alexandra because first thought is it's an amazing to have a smart and dedicated wife, right? Like a partner.
I'm very lucky to be with Alexandra and to have this kind of relationship, both in life and in, professional life, let's say, although I don't make the distinction because we only have one life, right? We work together even now at Algolia. I can't imagine working and doing things, entrepreneurial speaking, without Alex. And you know what? I was actually thinking, she should be here talking to you, not me, because what I do, I do the talking, but she's the one making things happen.
We will let her in next time, for sure, with such a great recommendation. I was about to ask you where do you draw the line, but my mind switched to another direction. What do you think is more important in the partner? Is it like the brain or like the support? Is it like the intelligence or the support that we're getting from someone to keep doing, like as entrepreneurs, our best?
She's definitely smarter than I am. Absolutely 100%. There's no debate there. She's absolutely supportive, and we've been supporting each other, honestly. Things changed. So we've founded 3 startups, 3 businesses together, and we had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes, but we kind of like grew together. And I think the decisive moment was back in, 10 years ago, back in 2012, when I realized somehow that just me being jumping from because I have an engineering background, jumping in the business bandwagon and trying to understand the business side, just me, is not enough. I needed also Alexandra to grow with me, to understand that side of the other side of the coin. And so I encouraged her to participate in 2012 into a startup competition in Paris, where she pitched and where she got the 3rd prize. So definitely the potential was there. I always recognized that about herself. And then things really accelerated in 2016 when we got accepted to another accelerator with our previous startup in US. It was a women-led accelerator where she took the stage, where she took the front row, and it was weird for me as a CEO to have the CTO, taking the light, but I was happy to do it because I knew that she could grow, and now she's an amazing leader. She's I do not have a single role model, but she's one of the role models that I have. She's the kind of servant leader behind the scenes, influencing others without others actually even knowing it. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
This is an amazing description of a partner in crime and in life and in startup world. Would you briefly take us through the previous startups, like the ones that you founded together, and then what brought them down and what did you learn from it as a Stoic, and like with the reflection, and then we'll get into like how the idea of MorphL came to life. I would like to ask also about the Techstars in Montreal. Recently, I've been meeting so many people that had their startups through Techstars systems in London, in Amsterdam, and now I'm meeting you with Techstars Montreal.
Yeah, Techstars, it's an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing accelerator. But you know, talking about accelerators, the very first accelerator we went through was back in 2010, Startup Bootcamp in Copenhagen for 3 months, which was in fact the first Techstars affiliate. And our first startup then, we were 3 partners, including myself and Alexandra. We didn't really know what we were doing. But for us, it was, we were just engineers. We thought that going through an accelerator is just sitting in a corner and coding and doing your thing, which clearly it's not. But that was a life-changing experience for us because we understood what building a tech startup means. We were absolutely not prepared for that. And so eventually, after, you know, trying and trying and trying, we basically failed. At the same time, what happened then was we were trying to build a product while also running a service company. We were doing projects or products for others while trying to sustain the startup. Doesn't work. There are 2 different mindsets, and it simply does not work. We did manage, however, to get some investments, so small seed rounds. That didn't work either because we didn't know. I didn't have the experience of taking people from one mindset, services, into a mindset of building a product. I didn't have it. I learned it afterwards, and I still have a lot of things to learn, but for sure I didn't have it then. I didn't have the experience of talking to investors that were actually part of our company, and we did a lot of mistakes there. Yes, true, the investors were also in their very early stage of their portfolio, but we basically were the ones to not necessarily blame, but the ones responsible for the ups and downs and eventually the failure of the startup. And it was hard. It was hard to decide to close, to shut down that and start MorphL. It was very, very hard.
I love the way that you just draw the line between the blame and the ownership.
Yeah.
So thank you for this. It's I think we will live in a better world. Doesn't matter what we do if we are owning the problems, not blaming ourselves or others. So you briefly scratched the surface on values, but this is a favorite topic of mine. Would you mind just sharing a couple of few important values and discuss why do you think they are important to organizations? Because I believe that some people are going to recognize their own ways of forming companies without having such an in-depth thought about the process of values and how important they are in building teams.
I myself have seen startups and entrepreneurs succeed without having the kind of values that I have, or without actually thinking about values. I've seen it, and it's fine. It works. However, for me, it did not work to think short term. For me, loyalty and trust are very, very important values. And it was very interesting to see that Algolia as a company, have 5 values: grit, humility, candor, care, and to tie them all together, trust. And it's not that they just have those on the walls. These people actually live these values. And that's why even in the hiring process, we dedicate half a day to talking to candidates about their values. I was not always necessarily aware of these values when building the other startups. Inevitably, being in the Eastern European ecosystem and culture, we tend to, when we close our eyes and we think about entrepreneurs, the reality is that most of the time, we're not generalizing, let's say that we're projecting. Most of the times you think of aggressiveness, you think of being very confident, but in an aggressive way.
Yeah.
You are you are a go-getter. You have to move mountains, and so on. And while, again, that works for some, and while I also did that for a while, it did not sit well with me. And more than that, I did not want to work with these kind of people. And I was actually trying to do what a lot of entrepreneurs probably hear, fake it until they make it. I was actually faking it. That was not me. And so I realized that, okay, that's short-term thinking. I have to think long-term. And that's when going through Alt MBA and reading all these books, and actually in 2016, I met a person that really shifted things around for me. And that is G.V. Freeman. I met him when we went with Alexandra at the accelerator that I was mentioning earlier. And we actually stayed at his Airbnb.
In Copenhagen or in Montreal?
That was in US.
Okay.
It was all out of all the places in St. Louis, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so it's, again, a strange thing. It happened. We were lucky. We connected. We became friends. He became our customer with a company that he was working with back then. Then he became our advisor at MorphL. And we're now friends. And he's a coach. And this is something that because I also mentor other startups and first-time entrepreneurs, this is something that I encourage other entrepreneurs as well. Why athletes should have coaches and entrepreneurs should not. And I think that's an idea that I just stumbled upon, but I think it makes sense. If every entrepreneur out there would have a coach near them, I think startups and the values and the way we will build this ecosystem would be totally different. And so, with the help of GV, and through pain and struggle, I managed to develop these kind of values, and I'm still working on them. I'm still working, and probably I'll be working on them my entire life.
Yeah, fortune has its ways, right? To meet and introduce people to one another.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that you probably know it and feel it, but I just want to highlight it there. We're in this conversation probably around 15 minutes now, and you've talked more about the human and empathic and authentic relationships and communication and people as resources, and not about like high-tech, trendy AI stuff.
Yeah.
So this is walking the talk. Thanks so much. So
thank you.
Tell me a bit more about the lessons that someone gets from being coached by another pair of eyes that sees the world in another way.
I think one of the best things that I got from GV was when he told me that my startups, my projects are not a measure or the success or failure of my projects and startups are not the measure of my self-worth. Being an entrepreneur, honestly, for me, is personal. And I think it's like that for a lot of entrepreneurs. How can it be different when your work is your life and your life is your work? And so for so long, I attached my self-worth to the bank account, to the house that I have, to the car that I own, external things. But then GV, and not only him, talking with other mentors as well, but he was a big part of that, opened my eyes and realized like, hey, you're not the sum of your external belongings. Your character is who you are. What you're doing when nobody else is around, that's who you are. That's your self-worth. And so I started, and look, I understood at that point what he was trying to tell me. But I would still behave differently, because so much of our society is like that. And it's hard. It's hard to be like that when you're in front of an investor and you're trying to sell your startup. It's hard to be like that when you're in front of a customer. But slowly, I started, having or combining these two mental states, let's say. It kind of like changed me. And it's not finished. I'm still working on that. I still find myself slipping into the other side, into the dark side. But at least now, with the help of GV and in general, I think through the help of a coach, at least you are aware when you're doing that. And you might be doing that in your family, you might be doing that in your team, with your teammates, founders, with investors, with customers. And if we manage to, catch ourselves in the act, I think that would greatly increase the probability of, at the end of the day, competency. Because that's, there's also, you can have, success is relative, right? You can have success, but that doesn't mean that you have competency. For me, clearly competency was something more important. Hey, I've been at it for 15, 16 years. And then slight success happened. Not the other way around. So I think that also helped me kind of like realize what happened to me when it happened.
An amazing quote that comes to my mind is, I don't know if you've seen this on the internet. It says, do, have, be. So yes. Do the things you want to do, to have the things that you want to have, and then be like successful or entrepreneur or whatever. Yeah. And then the actual like proper way of working is like identity test first. It's like be, do, and have. Yeah. Like being the person that you are, like a successful person by internally, not externally, by like cars and so on. And then do the things that this person is doing, and then have all the success that you want to have. So switching to this note in my mind about the bigger, equal, and smaller than, it's like being mentored by someone better than you, a place that you want to go to, being like competing with someone on your level just to keep your fire going, and then mentoring the others and helping others to make sure that you understand what you're doing and making even in a better way. You already mentioned your way of paying forward, like mentoring others. Would you tell me a bit more about the process of mentoring others, and why do you do it, and how do you make sure that you're providing the value to the people that you're helping?
I took a lot of inspiration from what happened to us in all of these accelerators that we've been through, but mostly Techstars. There's this method called the Socratic method, where as an entrepreneur, when I see another founder and entrepreneur making the mistakes, it's hard for me to, stop and let them do that mistake. And I'm like, hey, you need to do this and that. And a lot of the mentors that I met in our region, but in other, even in US and everywhere, most of them are like, hey, you need to do this and that. But the Socratic method, which is also described by Techstars, says something like, hey, ask questions, ask difficult, challenging questions, and let that entrepreneur, that founder, discover the truth for themselves. This is the reality. The reality is that some people understand from the mistakes of others. There are very few. And others, they need to understand, like I needed to actually understand from my own mistakes. It was more painful, but I actually internalize it better.
Trial and error.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trial and error is the best way of learning. For me, yep. It's amazing to realize that everything that you were told as a kid is like, don't do that. Don't put your hand on the stove unless you do it, so you know what the consequences are. There's no way of you learning, and the entrepreneurial journey is the same thing. Asking questions is a powerful instrument, and this is like what coaching is all about, done in a proper way. But it's hard, looking at these people and knowing, okay, he's going to make a mistake now, and how can I prevent this from happening? There is no way that you can
ask questions. Try to make, and hey, even today, I am being mentored by leaders at Algolia because I don't know how to do things, and so they are doing the same thing with me. They are asking difficult questions, challenging questions, and by trying to answer those questions in my mind, I learn, and they pretty much guide me, and I appreciate that. I mean, the ability to do that inside of a company of this size, like it's pretty amazing. It's pretty rare. Hey, I only have Algolia to compare to, but still.
Yeah, I will lend you a quote here from my friend Peter Sage. He says, "The questions are the steering wheel of the mind."
Yes.
So pretty powerful there. Would you please briefly describe the Techstars Montreal process, and how did you feel to get accepted in it? Or like few things that you learned from it?
Yep.
And then how did this help you as in the journey of MorphL, then Algolia?
Yep. So in 2019, we applied, I think it was sometime in March, we applied to Techstars Montreal AI, and we did that with intent, knowing that is the program that makes sense for us because we were an AI startup. It was the only one, the theme where the theme AI was present. And so in June, we had the first interview, and it was with the program manager of the Techstars Montreal AI, Bruno Morenzi, an amazing leader as well. And it was only like 15 or 20 minutes, the first interview. It was an interview just to know us, myself, Alexandra, why we're doing this as entrepreneurs. And for that 20 minutes, we actually prepared, myself and Alexandra, because hey, it's Techstars. We actually prepared an entire week, and we had kind of like a list of 100 questions that they could ask us. And we would role play, and hey, you answered that question, I answered this one, so that both of us can have kind of like the same time, and exposure. It was very calculated, and we took it very seriously. And even the application, I mean, we went like very seriously with designing and writing that application. And then the second meeting was diving deeper into the business itself. I think that was 30 minutes or so. And we talked about the problem that we're trying to solve, the solution, the go-to-market, all the good stuff, traction that we're having, kind of like the vision for MorphL. And then the last one was a presentation in front of a selection committee. So it was not just Bruno this time, it was other program managers from other Techstars Techstars accelerators from all over the world, but usually in US and Canada. And of course, I think I had a presentation of 5 minutes or so, and then they would ask questions. And each of these steps, after that, I understood that after each of these steps, less startups, were selected.
It's a filtering process.
Yeah, it's a filtering process. And then we, 1 month after, which was an excruciating amount of time, it felt like half a year or something like that. We got back from them. They told us like, hey, we're thinking, what do you think about coming to Montreal, to spend 3 months with us at the accelerator? And I was like, hey, when can we start?
Awesome.
And again, something happened then. Techstars, for us, we knew that if we got selected, it will be our last accelerator as entrepreneurs. Why? Because the first one was Startup Bootcamp, which was a Techstars affiliate. Mm-hmm. 10 years back. Here we are, after 10 years from that very first one where we didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. 10 years where MorphL was no longer our first rodeo. We had relationship with investors. We were talking, we had customers, we had grants from Google D&I and European Data Incubator. We had a lot of failures to draw experience from. And so it was emotional because we knew that this was once in a lifetime opportunity for us. And kind of like a nice circle, after 10 years. And we didn't even know how to react when they said that. I mean, we were happy inside of us, but externally, you could not see us smile. And Bruno said like, are you guys, that we got you selected. I mean, you are part of the cohort. Are you not happy? And then when he actually said that, we were so tensed, and we just relaxed during the Zoom call, and we started laughing, and it was like that. It was emotional for us, and boy, we did learn a lot in that program, and especially the people, mentors. After the Techstars, we also had an advisor. From the mentor network that Techstars provided us. So it was an amazing experience.
The industry that you're working on in tech, especially in AI, is constantly and very quickly changing rapidly. So you need to be at the top of your game. And previously you mentioned two people that inspire me a lot and that I admire, whose work I admire. It's Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday, of course. And would you please tell me how did this Alt MBA program by Seth Godin help you to be even better in what you do? Just out of personal interest, I really want to meet. I've met you being inside of it and see like what did you pick up there?
Because it's called Alt MBA, it's not an MBA.
Yeah, it's alternative MBA. That's why it's alt.
It's a kind of like, I think, a 1 month program or 1 month and something. And it's all about vulnerability. It's all about empathy, exercising all of that, leadership. It's about leadership. It's not about Excels. It's not about running a business with Excels. Yeah. It's about that. And it's about group therapy. You're put in a group every week. That group changes, which is very interesting because life is like that. You might start a startup, a business with a bunch of people, but you might end up with others. So it's very interesting like that. And so it was a great experience. It had an impact on me back then in 2019. I wanted actually to exercise more vulnerability. And so from that point of view, it really helped me. But it also had kind of like a side effect after I finished the Alt MBA. I was like depressed for a month and a half because I wanted that feeling of actually to talk to those people, because those people
awesome
helped me grow. So it's very important to be surrounded by people that, challenge you in a considerate way.
Environment matters.
Yep.
Great. Amazing. Quickly, let's jump into a bit more technical stuff. You created MorphL to be a company that goes to like media and publishing industry, and then pivoted to serve the e-commerce sector with these things that have barely anything in common. Would you please get us through the process?
Yes. So the vision was always for MorphL to predict user behaviors. Where you would use those behaviors or predictions, it did not matter to us as a vision. We simply started with the publishing industry because the Google Digital News Innovation Fund was geared towards that. But then talking to customers, I started talking to customers even before writing the first line of code. And I would start talking to publishers. I would start talking to gaming companies and e-commerce. And of course, e-commerce was an industry that was very interested in what we were building. This was the signal. And like I mentioned, we went through a lot of ups and downs, a lot of failures, a lot of accelerators. And even from the previous startups that we built, pivoting from one industry to another, from one angle to another, was kind of like a second nature to us. And when we noticed the response that we got from e-commerce companies, we immediately pivoted. And from a technical point of view, it was basically the same thing because we built the platform to be generalistic. We just had to kind of like understand their problems better, like to change our pitch and so on. But it was one of the best decisions that we've made.
Obviously. Can you tell me a bit more about the way that you keep yourself updated into like the technology? Do you talk to people that are way deeper into it? Just share a bit of clues on this, please.
So I think the first and the best way to do it is to actually build AI products. And I was again part of the Algolia Recommend team. I'm now acting as an AI product manager for a new product that we're going to launch next year. And so I'm always surrounded by machine learning engineers, and it's the best way to actually understand what's happening in the industry. Then I also have this podcast, Get Your AI On, where I interview smart people, and I understand and I try to learn from them. And then, of course, I also read books on AI, papers. I try to keep myself up to date. A few books that I can recommend, and there are also a little bit philosophical, of course, but Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom is very interesting. The Citizen's Guide to Artificial Intelligence is another one. John Zurelli, actually, he's one of my guests on the podcast. Very interesting book, and it kind of like opens your eyes. I also had a fellow Romanian that he's studying in Netherlands, talking about, out of all the possible topics, on AI and God. So while that's not necessarily about technology itself, hard skills, how to code AI, it makes you wonder. It makes you ask these questions. It makes you think differently about stuff. And so much of what we're building with AI, so much of it has a lot of implication on the ethical, layer. And we don't talk about that too much in AI startups or in AI companies.
Or enough.
More enough, yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Last, almost we're getting to the end of our conversation. Last but not least, of course, it's always important, the mental and physical health of the founders and the leaders. How do you manage to keep yourself, as the Stoics said, they did boxing, they did a lot of stuff that helped them persevere. How do you treat yourself?
Yeah, I struggle with that. For me, what works is I play tennis. I like to play tennis. I go to the gym. Unfortunately, not that often. But what helps me the most is actually reading philosophy. And I know that it sounds very boring, but in my vacation this summer, and I'm actually planning the one in the winter, I just want to read philosophy, honestly. For me, reading philosophy is simply therapeutical. That's it. I don't know how to talk about philosophy. Don't ask me things like smart things. I don't always understand things that I'm reading. I simply don't. But I'm trying. I'm doing my best. But it gets me into a state of mind that is tranquil, that is kind of like calm. And I'm trying to get that into, the other side of my
mental fitness.
Yeah. And I'm trying to keep that. Of course, after 2-3 days, it goes away. But, it's we forget and we remind ourselves about these things, and you start again and again.
Books are compounding, so keep up the great way of your handling yourself. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Chip. It has been really an amazing journey through leadership and values and technology, more about actually the person's side of things than towards the business and the stuff that everyone can read on Algolia's website or on LinkedIn profiles. So last thing I would like to ask the question that we do to every single person that comes on the podcast. And what would you like to be remembered for?
Oh my God. That's very complicated. Am I allowed to say that I don't know? I know that it has to be something about impact, but I honestly don't know more than that. The shape and form of that impact, I don't know. I'm searching for it myself.
Is there anyone allowed to say that you are not supposed to answer this question? So thank you very much for this really honest and valuable ending to our amazing conversation. I think we just barely started, but we will leave the continuity of this conversation for maybe a next episode. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here, Ciprian Borodescu. Wish you and Algolia and Alex, of course, more and more success and inspiring other people in the Southeastern Europe region that are dreaming of building a startup or exiting to an amazing company with similar values to theirs. Thank you for lending us our time, and all the best.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on the Recursive podcast yet again. You know that in order to get such content next week, you will need to subscribe to our channels. Can't wait to have you back. See ya.
In the next episode of the Recursive podcast, Georgi talks to the co-founder of R-Create, a platform for sustainable packaging solutions for e-commerce players. Meet Adina Huma.
And of course I was pushing, I wanted more, I wanted faster, I wanted better, and everyone was like, hold on, calm down, okay? And after a while, I realized that, I shouldn't, interfere in their life, because they are doing great what they're doing since a lot of years. And nothing actually, I can't promise them if they're gonna go my way, it's gonna be better. I don't know, okay? So, there were like 4 or 5 with one idea, and I was on the other side and said, no, I think we should, stay each person with his own path. Then I tried to, I had this idea, of course there is a lot of bad wording in Romania about Romania. And each time I traveled abroad and I stayed in a few countries. When I went back in Romania, I was like, why everybody's talking so badly about this country? I mean, why we're doing it? We could, rephrase it. Of course, it's nothing, perfect. But I stayed in Canada for a while, and everybody was so proud of being Canadian, and none of them they were Canadians. I mean, Canada has Canadians like 9%. Everybody is from somewhere else. And I was okay. And then I started to make like a business of traveling or in events to show to Romanians, the beauty of this country and what we can bring out. And that was better than the first one. And then with Linda, we tried to make another business, but after a few months, we realized that the spot was already taken. And then we got into this point.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.